the chair has given background to the study. We will present to you in 2 steps. There are 2 of us that will present to you the findings of the study. I'll give the introduction and the background to the study, and my colleague Yahya Omar will give you the statistics, the data, the analysis that we did to the data, the conclusions that we drew, and the recommendations that we made out of the the conclusions of the data that we captured. So without much wastage of time, we are all aware that the world economy is not in very good shape. And as a result of that, there is the problem of employment. So there is competition to get employment. However, you would note that there are factors that would therefore make one qualify or not qualify for employment. First of all, if you cannot speak the language of communication at your point of employment, you will not get a job because you'll not even be able to apply for it. So ESOL, which is English for speakers of other languages, is the key, is the most basic level of English that you require for you to communicate. Our study, as you will see, has dug out to find out the level of ESOL and what people say about it. And as we go along, you'll make up your own mind as to whether our conclusions and recommendations are right or not. Otherwise, it is recognized that lack of English is a very big impediment to find jobs. And we also found that there are certain people within the community who would have wished to undertake the ESOL training, but they cannot do it because of various factors. Again, these will be highlighted as we go along. We also would like to, our study also came across the fact that Leicester is the 10th largest city in the 10th largest and the most diverse city in the UK outside London. Especially when it comes to newcomers, a great deal of people end up in Leicester. It is recognized that there's about 70 languages and dialects that are spoken in Leicester. So some of the languages, like those from the Southeast Asia that are spoken in Leicester, we have 16% speaking Gujarati, Punjabi by 3%, Somali by 3%, Urdu by 2%. So the Asian population makes up about a quarter of the population, and it is recognized that there is a high, of course, average of black people in Leicester as well. And most recently, the Somali problem that has resulted in many refugees coming here, others relocating from other parts of Europe, has brought in a large number of Somalis. So they're quite a percentage, in the population of Leicester. So there are factors which shape the need and policies for ESOL. I don't know if I've already said what ESOL is. ESOL stands for English for Speakers of Other Languages. It is a particularly designed program to help people from various parts of the world who come to the UK to settle in with regards to language. So there are factors which influence people's access to ESOL, and some are classified under social factors while others are considered under economic factors. So Part 2, which will be presented by my colleague, will cover the key findings of the study, the data analysis, the conclusions, and the recommendations. So I was just essentially introducing Yahya to come in and take the floor. Thank you very much.
Thanks to all of you for your attendance. I won't bore you. I'll try to be quick. I won't give you a lot of numbers. I'll try to be succinct. I'll start with the key findings. We came across a few interesting, some obvious but interesting in the way it turned out. The first thing which is obvious is that if you can't speak English, it lowers your chances in the job market. And when things are not good, when there's an economic downturn, it makes it worse. Secondly, that in terms of retaining a job or advancing in that job, if you have no English skills, then your chances are lowered. In addition to that, the ability to communicate in English also improves self-confidence, increases social engagement, and enhances personal independence. Also, among the newly arrived communities, the need for ESOL is substantial. And not only among the newly arrived, also among some of the established communities who are not part of mainstream society, who are sort of secluded, the need is there. In addition to that, among those who need ESOL, a high number of them have indicated a preference for ESOL for work. Now, many members of priority groups are not aware of ESOL provision opportunities, and I think this is an important fact that we'd like to highlight, lack of awareness. A large number among those who are aware of their needs for ESOL provision, they did not actively seek such provision. And this is where we like, based on other studies which have been done before, this is where we like to differentiate between the need for ESOL and the demand for ESOL. Despite a high need, the demand is not there, hasn't been created. Now, when it comes to women, they are disproportionately represented among those who wish to attend ESOL but are not able because of various reasons, which we will touch upon. Now, there's also some who have no substantial income, they have low income, they'd love to take ESOL classes, but it's not within their budgets. And then there are many who would prefer ESOL provision to be based within their communities, and we'll also touch upon the reasons that we found to be leading them into that direction. Now, we've used the word priority groups to describe the communities that we targeted for this research. The word priority groups is also being used in the newly published new ESOL approach. And so we've sort of taken it aboard, and we are trying to show that the people that we targeted for this research are part of these priority groups in one way or another. Now, according to the new ESOL approach, the new publication that came out, I think May of this year, they have some guidelines to define who or what communities are part of these priority groups. The first thing they say is that for a community or for a particular group to be part of a priority group, it has to have poor or no English language skills. In addition to that, they have to be isolated from communities other than their own, and also they have to be underrepresented in in learning provision, and they have to be on the path to becoming British citizens. And then lastly, they have to have been granted refugee status. Now, one group that we found sort of fits into all of those categories is the newly arrived. Now, this newly arrived have been defined as asylum seekers, refugees, migrant workers, EU nationals who've chosen to make Leicester their home. Now, among the newly arrived communities, we chose the Somali, the Iraqi, and the Swahili, and some Polish targets. Now, in addition to those, we also looked at people who are settled, then they are fully, they're settled, they've been here for a while. There is a but after that. They're either secluded, they're either underrepresented in some categories or overrepresented in other categories. The communities we chose are the Pakistani and the Bangladeshi. Now, in whole, we've targeted the Somalis, the Iraqis, the Swahilis, and the Bangladeshis. The study had two parts. We had focus groups, we did 6 focus groups, and we did surveys of about 120 individuals. Now, for the target groups, we concentrated on the newly arrived in order to get more vibrant data out of it. For the surveys, we targeted the whole pack. Now, the people we studied, or the participants in the study, the interesting thing is most of them have been here 4 to 7 years, as you can see, and the ones who have been here under 1 year, 5%, and the ones who've been here over 13 years are 8%. Now, among the people we studied, 97% of them, they felt that they had a need for ESOL. 97% indicated they had a need for ESOL. These needs, we categorize them into 2 groups. There are some needs which are socially driven and other needs which are economically driven. The socially driven needs come out of a desire to make friends, to be able to catch the bus with confidence, to go see the GP without having any interpreters, and that sort of thing. Now, the economically driven needs are centered around employment, the desire to get a job, keep a job, and advance in a job. Now, among the people we spoke to, one of them told us that the need is visible from the level of translation needed in the community. And many people need translation whenever they come into contact with English speakers. I think that sort of conveys the message. Another individual told us that, but for most of our women, they need at least beginner skills to know if somebody is greeting them or throwing insults at them without necessarily relying on body language. Another participant told us, I've been in this country for 7 years and I still can't fill job application forms. My friend filled the form for me and told me what to say in the interview. So that sort of also gives you a picture of what is happening. Another person told us, many of us can't get a job because we have not accomplished the first job yet, which is gaining language skills. Another person told us that when you have no language skills, you become demoralized and give up on the whole process. Now, these are the people who are off the radar. These are the people who've gone underground. These are the people that it's going to take a lot of work to find. Now, another individual told us that one of our main obstacles in finding work is lack of experience. But how do you gain experience if you can't find work in the first place? And the reason you can't find work in the first place is because you don't have English language skills to a level that makes you employable. So it paints a picture of a vicious cycle where we have to make the ball stop at some point by giving them English skills. Now, another person told us that my qualities as an employee were considered excellent, and I was invited to apply for a supervisory position. Now, unfortunately, this individual could not qualify because of his low language skills. So this also paints the picture of advancement within their jobs or careers. Now, in terms of keeping their job, one of the quotes we got, a person told us that if a company wants to lay off employees, those whose language skills are minimal will be first to let go, which sort of makes sense. People want to keep the best employees or those whom it's easier to communicate with. Now, we were given several reasons which stood as barriers to accessing ESOL. The largest group, about 21% of them, which is sort of interesting, told us that the main barrier was full-time employment. Now, the second largest group was those who told us that they did not know about ESOL provision. So you have 21% saying they cannot access ESOL provision because they are in employment, and 20% saying they cannot access ESOL because they don't know where to get the necessary courses. Now, lack of awareness. What we did, we grouped all those reasons that we got from the survey and the ones we got from the focus group discussions, and we put them under some specific themes that came out. Now, one of the main things was lack of awareness. Lack of awareness, some people told us that they've never seen where language training is being offered. I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's the reality. The second thing was full-time employment. And the sad thing is the sort of employment these individuals were talking about were low-skilled employment, where they were taken on despite their lack of skills. So one person told us that I think that there are some jobs in the factories which do not require good English, like the sandwich factories. So these people are sort of in a problematic situation because they can't go get English skills or develop themselves because they are working, and yet they don't have job security or opportunity in the work they are doing. And then there was family commitments and lack of childcare. This was mostly cited by female participants. Bluntly told, one lady told us that, she said our main challenge is the children. In some ways, she said, we can say the children are putting us behind. Having young children makes it difficult to venture out there and look for work. If there were facilities to teach us English and also some help in taking care of the children, then perhaps they would have ventured out there to acquire some skills. Then there was an issue of location of the provision. Some of them said they felt that they needed training that was based within their communities and designed for their communities. Now, I'll come back to this issue because there are some cultural factors that are related to this, and I'll touch upon them. Then there was the issue of flexibility. When I say flexibility, I mean in terms of timing. For those people who are working, some are on shift work. And then in terms of class composition, there are some who would prefer single-sex classes. And also, again, there are cultural issues which are related to this, and I'll touch upon them. Then there's perception on ESOL suitability. 68% of the individuals indicated that they felt ESOL was not good enough for them to get a job. So again, that tells us that if they feel it's not worth it, they're not going to go out and venture out there to become learners or to acquire English skills. Now, when it comes to culture, there are some interesting things. Among the communities we studied or we researched upon, especially among the women, the idea of staying home and taking care of the children is considered to be a virtue. So, and most of the women were very proud of the fact that they're staying home, taking care of their children. And then the second thing is this issue of avoiding mixed classes. They felt it was out of their comfort zone to go sit in a mixed class. And then the class proximity, this was also a very interesting issue because some of them felt if the ESOL provision was within their community, or perhaps even, let's say, in the community center, or and being offered within the local schools where the children were attending, then it wouldn't be a problem to attend them. But among some of these communities, for the women to venture far from within the homestead was looked upon as being a bit too venturous. And then there's the perception on female advancement, and this is something we picked out of the men participants. One participant told us that, yes, I'd like the ladies to acquire some skills, some knowledge and this and that, but he didn't say that without a caveat. He said, I'd prefer they don't do it, but they don't use it against us after acquiring these skills. So that also highlights cultural issues which are affecting these communities. Now, you also have the issue of failed asylum claims. In Leicester, we have 5,000 to 6,000 failed asylum claims. Most of them would also like to, the ones we spoke to, they indicated a need to acquire English skills, but the lack of capability. And then there's those who are on low income. They don't qualify for free classes, but the amount of money they earn does not allow them to go and pay for classes. Now, in terms of conclusion, what we are saying is it's critical to push for effective outreach work that aims to raise demand by connecting with the hardest to reach. This is very important because the need is there, but the demand is not there. Work has to be done. It's not going to be easy work, but work needs to be done to raise the demand. In addition to that, this appears also in the newly published the new approach to ISOL. Local authorities and their partners are best placed to identify the people in their areas who struggle most to integrate and to find ways of reaching them. There has to be strong partnership between the local authorities and other and their key partners, community organizations, other service providers, in order to be able to do that. Now, the other thing also is that enough of the hardest to reach are not being attracted into ISOL provision, and this has appeared also in several other studies. It's also in the report. Now, our recommendations, first thing, there's a need to raise awareness of ISOL and marketing of ISOL among these communities. Raising awareness because there's a high percentage of them who are not aware of the provision that is out there. And marketing because those whose view are that ISOL will not prepare us for work need to be told there are ISOL courses that are targeted for employment purposes. So that is also available. So this is very important. And the next recommendation is that we felt there is a need for community-based ISOL provision for the reasons of culture, for reasons of proximity for the women. And also, it's also important to point out that for many of the participants from some of these communities are illiterate, especially among the women. There's a high illiteracy rate. Some of them have never been to school. So for them to venture out there, it's going to be too much of a, acting like a cowboy actually, going too far away from the communities. So if it's within the community, even if it's for preparational purposes, to get them ready, to build their confidence so that they are ready to go out there. The other thing also, the provision has to be flexible. Flexible in terms of timing and flexible in terms of class composition. If most of them would be able and would be happy to attend the classes, if they are single-sex classes, then it's something that ought to be considered. Now, for the ladies, most of them, as they indicated, their children, they felt the children were acting as an obstacle for them accessing ISOL classes. Now, if they have an on-site or nearby crèche, that will facilitate their attendance. And then recruitment from local communities. I say this because if you recruit for both the crèche and the ISOL classes, if you have, okay, I know discrimination is not allowed, but if you recruit from the local communities, this will achieve two things. One, these people, especially women, They should be targeted. If you recruit them, one, they'll act as role models. And in many of these communities, what you have is, if they see a person from the community has achieved a certain thing, then they feel, yes, I can do it. So that is very important. The teacher would be acting as a teacher and also as a very strong and powerful role model for the other class attendees. And secondly, in child caring, this we found out in our research, and that's also been reported out in other researches, most of the ladies from these communities, they felt that they would only be comfortable to leave their children with people from their communities. It's a maternal instinct sort of thing. That's how I put it. But that's also a fact. So recruitment from within the communities to sort of get them moving. Now, ESOL skills should be highly focused on employment and filling application forms, attending interviews, that sort of thing. Build their confidence and give them the skills. Local information, advice and guidance within the community to signpost these individuals, to tell them, well, they'll go there, they'll get directed to the proper services that are available. If it's within the community, this is where they walk their children in the evenings. If the service is available within the community, then they can freely walk in there and they can hopefully be directed properly to what services they need. This is a bit, I say these charity-based classes because of those who do not qualify for free provision. Now, in terms of charity-based classes, this is where the community itself and the teachers and the other partners can participate in providing some charity-based classes for those who do not qualify for free provision. And as I said, there's a large number of them in our city. Now, this is a bit, I thought this was a good idea because for those women who are not planning to leave their houses, this is something they can gain from. And this has been done in developing countries. For instance, in Kenya, they have radio programs where they teach people in the villages how to speak English. And the community radio stations, there are a lot of community radio stations in Leicester targeting those different communities, those ladies, those women, those mothers can be reached while they're in their house, give them a bit of, hello, how are you, come out, that sort of thing. Then hopefully build their confidence a bit and they'll feel, you know what, I can do more of this, and they can come out of their houses. That's all. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Well, bravo, thank you. Before I just proceed with the program, I would like to thank Dr. Omara, the very informative background information that he has given us about the research, and the very well-structured depiction of the whole research that has been presented by this young bravo man, Yahya, over it. I would, on behalf of our organization, would like to thank them. So do I to Goodwin Gray, the company who has contracted and commissioned this. Not to speak much, but I would like to invite to the chair Mr. Paul Murphy to just speak a bit about before he leaves us, because he is very much committed to another engagement on ESOL and work priorities for Leicester. Come, Mr.
Well, first of all, thank you, Isaac, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be advised by your community.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for the presentation. That was really precise, succinct, and got the point across. Just a quick introduction. My name is Paul Murphy, and I'm the project manager for City Strategy, and that is a pilot by the DWP to use new and innovative methods to try and get people from disadvantaged communities into employment. So we've allowed to try lots of new techniques and different ways of doing that. And of course, through this, we've worked with ISA and St Matthews, and with Bangladesh and the Pakistani community. It's strange because I actually have experienced the boot on the other foot, because I was lucky enough to work in Africa for 5 years. So I was the person going into a country, and I was the one who hadn't got the local language. So Setswana and Swahili were the two languages which I had to work with. But fortunately, the people in those countries are a lot more welcoming and want to speak English, whereas in England, we're not quite as welcoming, and we expect everybody to speak English. So it was a slightly different approach. So I do have empathy about people coming to new countries and the need to sort of to understand the language. I mean, we're involved with business support, and the key things we talk about: planning, training, evaluation, and communication. 4 key things in any business. And if you take away communication, you've got a big problem. You've got a big problem starting your own business, and you've got a big problem if you're working in a business. So communication is really key, and this is what this program is all about. So we commissioned a program, and we tried to sort of, again, be innovative. We asked Apex and Business in St Matthews to work together, because each 3 had their unique selling point, and they could work together effectively as a team. And that's how it came about. And Isaac was doing the IAG and the research. So I think the best way to find out about anything is to ask the people who are going to receive it. And I think the research shows that. You've gone out and asked everybody what they thought. That's far better than anybody else assumed. So that was a really well-presented piece of work. You've asked the people what they want. I think the way forward was really good. I thought you came up with some great points. And just to sort of try and help fill in there, the awareness is where I agree with that, and we've been working on IAG and case loading. So in a small way we've been doing that, but that just needs to be expanded out. And that will be done hopefully through Sue's team and the multi-access centres. So there'll be about 6 centres in place throughout the city within the next 2 years, achieving what Highfields is doing. So I think that's on stream, and I think that's going to come into place. There's a lot of development work between the communities and Sue's team to make it work. Support, and you're absolutely right. People are getting low-paid jobs, making sandwiches. That's okay. They need income, but some way we've got to work with employers so they can get an hour out and sit down and do ESOL in the work environment. So that's up to us to work with employers to get some sort of subsidy to allow them to happen. So I think that's worth following up as well. Childcare provision to allow the women to go and have time for themselves, and we are doing that, and we have commissioned the Somali Development Service to provide childcare for people going on to training. So that is in place, but on a small scale. So again, we're in line with what you're saying. Learning styles, that's the same for anybody. Some people prefer audio, visual. Some people want to do it in single sets. Some want to do it in different locations. I agree, that's cultural and just individual styles. That needs to be developed in the active centres. And really, it's just ESOL isn't definitely going to get you a job, but it's a platform to move on. So there's one comment that they didn't think it was necessary to get employment. It probably isn't straight away, but it's necessary if you want to advance in employment, which is what we want. So I think it's a win-win. It's a win because people coming into the country who can't speak English need to, for all the reasons you said, but also for the government to make sure that people coming into the country have the skills to contribute towards the economy. So it suits everybody. I just can't see what the problem is. And the only thing I would say, which I have picked up from Isaac in different communities, is that the best time to get people is the day they arrive in the country. A lot of these programs are delayed for 6 months or a year, and people lose their excitement and enthusiasm. And if you sort of gave them the opportunity from day one, I think that would improve everybody's sort of success rate. So that's it. I hope you can sort of move forward with the recommendations. We'll certainly support you. There's nothing I didn't disagree with, and there's lots we're already doing. It just needs to be expanded out. So that was brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Last but not least, I would like to invite to this chair a chair of mine in MAC, the Multi-Access Center, which is Sue Grogan, who is from the Leicester Learning Partnership. I would like her to come to the chair, give information about Leicester new communities, language barriers, integration, and work opportunities. Sue.
Expecting to have to speak today, but being me, I've usually got plenty to say, so I'm sure I'll manage. This is a really interesting piece of work, and it's for me it confirms a lot of things that I knew already. But to actually have it, to say, right, this is a good piece of research, it's very legitimate. I can obviously take it and wave it under a lot of people's noses to say, look, you have to take notice of this. It's really important, so I'm really pleased about that. I've got a couple of things I want to just to comment on. I think it's very well put together, and I would really like to think about, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to use this? Where do we need to take it? Who do we need to talk to? Now, there's some things that we can influence locally. There's some things we can influence on a sub-regional basis, the city and the county. What I don't have any power to do is to influence the government at this point. And the point that Paul raised about having access to ESOL from day one, the government's made it quite clear they don't want to go down that route, and there's a lot of people working at a national level trying to address that. It's something I personally believe should happen, but that's the policy, and unfortunately we have to work with that. And that's one of the things that ESOL providers have to work with. They have to stick within government rules, whether they like them or not. So that's a fact. It doesn't mean to say you can't look at how you can work your way around them, but we have to be mindful of that. I would like to take this firstly to the City Skills for Life Consortium and also to the City and County Skills for Life and ESOL group, where you have all the providers sitting around the table. So I will create basically a box of this at some point. And also, if you have it electronically, again, I'd like that, and we can put it on our website. That's the easy bit. But it's about how we're going to take these messages forwards. And there's several things I want to bring to your attention. One, as a woman sitting here, it's quite interesting listening to the vibes around the room when we talk about women. Well, as an empowered woman, I feel very strongly that women should be empowered. Now, I don't know, as a man at the other end of it, whether people actually know what they're going to do when these women are all empowered. There are some cultures that have a different bias to where the power is. And I just think, if you empower all the women, you could be in for a very interesting time. You might not get the results you expect. I don't have a problem with that. I'll just say that one with you. In terms of looking at what is needed and how to entice people into the classes, I have absolutely agree they should be at the right times, the right places, they should be culturally appropriate. We need to have childcare provision, and that needs to be locally available. So all those things I do thoroughly agree with, and we need to look at how we can build that into the services that we provide. I'm not so sure about radio-based ESOL. I think if in order to empower people, we need to get them out of the house. So I think it's useful to a point, but then after that I say no, let's look at how you can get people out, because there's no point in speaking English and talking to yourself if there's nobody there to talk to. I think that's all I want to say about that at the moment. I have started to read it through, and I've obviously got more comments that I'll feed back. What I will tell you about is the multi-access centre programme across the city, and it's also going across the county. As Paul mentioned, the multi-access centres are about developing services to get people into work. It's about getting people off long-term benefits into work to improve their skills and ultimately to improve the economy. And what the Learning Partnership's been asked to do is to identify 6 areas in the city and then another 6 areas in the county, which are all classed as areas of deprivation, where we can start to develop those services. And in the city we've already got Highfields and we've already got the City Back. And we've also looked at 6 other areas, of which they are Broadston and New Parks, Saffron Esmond, Gilmorton, North East Leicester, but also here in St Matthews and St Mark's. And I have the pleasure of chairing the working groups in all those areas, so I'm quite familiar with some of the faces here.
She's my chairman.
Yes. And he does exactly what I say.
She's my chairwoman.
Except when he doesn't.
She doesn't like it. She's my chairwoman. My chairperson.
Chairperson. His chair. Whatever, I answer to it. But what we're looking to do is to develop services to improve people's skills, to get them ready for employment. And obviously ESOL is one of those key skills. So what we've been looking at is where we can work across the area, who we can work with, and how we're going to try and provide services. And the whole thing is part of a huge programme that's got central government funding called Working Neighbourhoods Fund, or WNF for short. And I have the role of putting the capital plans together, which is all about the buildings and the ICT and all the rest of it. And then my colleague Nelda Capia and Marilyn Turner have the role of putting the services together. And what we're looking at in this area is what's actually needed, what's already there on the ground, and what we need to buy in through Working Neighbourhoods Fund. And that's what we're in the process of doing at the moment. There's a very rigorous process that the City Council has to go through with anybody that wants to have access funding, and it's called the tendering process, and it's very long and it's very boring, but unfortunately you have to do it because it's public money and it has to be justified. You have to say what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, how many people you're going to work with, etc., etc. And then it's all tied up in a contract that you have to stick to. And that's the process that's being developed at the moment. There's something called a PQQ, or a pre-qualification questionnaire, that has to be completed by any organisation that wants to bid in for money. And it's basically to say, we're an organisation, you can trust us with money, we're well set up, we will do the job that you're asking us for. That process is happening at the moment, and then the organisations that have got through that process can then start to tender out for the services that we want. If an organisation isn't successful, it doesn't mean they can't be part of a partnership or a consortium with an organisation that is. And that needs to be considered, because no one organisation can do absolutely everything. It's simply not feasible. And that's what we would be looking for. And in this area in particular, we know that there is a huge demand for ESOL. So we're looking to do a lot of capacity work, a lot of development work, and looking at what the needs are and then where we can actually provide it and to whom. And it's part of a much bigger programme that the whole access centres is all about.
Thank you very much.
Is that all right?
It is.
If anybody's got any questions about the access centres, if they're going to be long and complicated, I'll talk to you afterwards. Okay.
Coming back to in-house, there is somebody who is from a partner organization.